16 years ago, a young woman vanished on her way home from the train station, disappearing without a trace in the heart of bustling London, leaving her family shattered by grief and grasping at nothing. Authorities suspected a man seen behind her in the final CCTV footage was involved. But with no body found and too few leads to pursue, the investigation eventually stalled for years. Yet throughout all that time, one desperate mother never gave up hope, clinging to the slim chance that her daughter had not been forgotten, and that one day the truth would resurface. Then one day, when a chance discovery beneath the damp soil at Woodberry Wetlands was reported, a crucial detail that everyone had overlooked came to light. A detail powerful enough to upend the entire case in a way no one could have imagined. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. On the autumn evening of October 16, 2009, London was enveloped in the city's characteristic late-season damp chill, with light rain drizzling down in a thin veil over the glossy streets around Highbury and Islington. The air carried the metallic scent of underground rails, mixed with the spillover of beer from crowded pubs on Upper Street, where yellowish lights spilled onto the wet sidewalks, stretching into blurry streaks under the feet of passers-by. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday night, noisy but safe, until the name Anna Whitford vanished from the city's familiar rhythm. Anna, 24 years old, a junior designer, a young woman with a gentle smile and bright eyes, beloved by friends for her warmth and grace. That evening, she left Highbury and Islington Station at 2041. Stepping out into the flow of commuters, pouring from the train, one hand clutching the collar of her trench coat against the cold wind. A server at a nearby pub recalled seeing Anna hurry past the window, moving briskly, as if trying to get home before the rain picked up. Just minutes later, a taxi driver parked at a traffic light said he spotted a young woman standing under a street lamp, who looked like Anna, talking to someone about 20 meters away. He couldn't make out the other person's face because the light was too dim, and the rain created a thin mist over the road. As Anna turned the corner at the intersection of Upper Street and Canonbury Lane, a traffic camera captured a glimpse of her light-colored trench coat flickering in the rain. Then bus number 30 passed by, completely blocking the frame. When the bus moved on, the next camera no longer picked up any sign of her. In the Whitford small home not far away, Anna's parents still assumed she'd return as usual, but the evening stretched into night, then past midnight, with her phone going unanswered and messages unread. Her mother kept dialing, hearing only the cold beep echoing in the darkness. Her father sat motionless by the window, watching every passing car light, waiting for a familiar silhouette. When the clock struck 2 a.m. and the door remained silent, simmering worry turned into real panic. They called Anna's friends, all of whom confirmed she'd left the station early, and no one knew where she'd gone after that. The house sank into stifling silence, broken only by the ticking clock and the sound of her mother's pacing on the wooden floor. By 8 a.m. the next day, in a state of desperation, the Whitford family walked into Islington Police Station and filed an official missing person report. Just minutes after they left the front desk, Anna's file was immediately handed to the initial investigation team, who urgently began reconstructing her final 12 hours with the intensity typical of adult disappearances under unusual circumstances. The first confirmed timestamp was Anna's appearance at Highbury and Islington Station, 2041. Station exit cameras showed her stepping into the light rain, walking quickly, head slightly bowed, both to shield from the drizzle and to focus on the path ahead. Officers paused on key frames, zooming in and enhancing them, trying to spot anyone walking too close to her right from the station. But amid the rush-hour crowd, nothing stood out. From the station, the team moved to collecting CCTV from pubs along Upper Street. A young staff member at a pub near the station confirmed seeing Anna pass the window around 2045, matching footage showing her silhouette gliding under the yellowish streetlights on the wet pavement. Cameras from pubs, restaurants, and convenience stores in the area were backed up by technicians that same morning in case the data got overwritten, something that happened frequently with London's CCTV systems back then. While one group gathered videos, another scanned traffic cameras at the intersection near Canonbury Lane. It was here that investigators discovered the biggest blind spot of the previous night. The camera showed Anna turning the corner, but right after, bus number 30 blocked the entire view, and when it passed, she was gone. The next camera, just about 120 meters away, captured no matching figure at all. The 8-minute gap between the two cameras, from the bus blocking the frame to the next clear shot, became the mysterious void the team had to scrutinize most closely. 8 minutes is an eternity in a disappearance. Enough time to turn down a side street, meet someone, get into a car, or simply vanish from the city's sight. Alongside the CCTV collection, an officer contacted the mobile network directly for Anna's phone data. Cell tower pings showed her phone last connected near Canonbury around 2052, then went silent. That opened multiple possibilities. Battery died, turned off, dropped in water, or taken. However, the lead investigator quickly noted that the abruptness of the signal loss, no movement, no attempts to call or text, made it far more unusual than typical late-home cases. Initial notes from the team showed no bank transactions, Oyster card swipes, or online activity from Anna after 2041. Everything stopped right at the moment she vanished from camera view. The investigators held a quick meeting in the monitoring room to assess the case's risk level. Though there were no clear signs of violence or crime yet, they agreed to classify it as medium to high risk, because all traces of Anna ended too suddenly, as if an invisible hand had erased her movements from London in minutes. To avoid missing any link, they expanded CCTV collection to include secondary cameras on smaller roads toward Canonbury and nearby parking lots. Another officer was sent to interview the taxi driver, who'd seen her talking to a man from a distance. Though vague, he remembered yellow light reflecting off the young woman's light-colored coat, and a figure standing a few meters away, seemingly a head taller than her. While not enough to identify a suspect yet, the team noted it as a piece that could become crucial later. Once the temporary timeline was complete, from 2041 to 2052, from footsteps on Upper Street to the 8-minute void, the investigators knew their only real lead at that point was what the cameras had failed to capture. They printed a map of Anna's final route, pinned it to the board in the meeting room, circled Canonbury Lane in red, and labeled it briefly, Zone of Disappearance, the disappearance zone. That became the investigation's first critical knot, the point every hypothesis had to circle back to. Less than an hour after the temporary timeline was finalized, a field search team was immediately deployed to Upper Street, the last place Anna appeared before vanishing into the 8-minute camera gap. Scent dogs trained for missing persons were released at the Highbury and Islington station exit, then led through the growing Saturday morning crowds. Though the rain had stopped, the pavement was still damp and smelled of overnight rain, immediately complicating things for the K9 unit. Steam rising from the ground mixed with overlapping old and new scents, blurring many cues the dogs relied on. Still, one dog picked up a faint trail heading toward Upper Street, matching the direction seen on CCTV. The search team followed, weaving through newly opened cafes and pubs, still lingering with last night's beer smell, trying to recreate Anna's path step by step. On a folded map, they marked with marker pens spots where dogs paused for more than a few seconds, but the overnight rain had washed away nearly all scent traces, making the marks mostly referential. When they reached the intersection where bus number 30 had blocked the camera view, the scent dogs first showed hesitation. They circled the area 2 or 3 times, sniffing pavement cracks, steps, signposts, but couldn't lock on to the next direction. An officer noted in the report, "Scent trail breaks here." It was a short but heavy phrase, meaning Anna could have turned down any of the nearby side streets. From that intersection, 3 paths led to quieter residential areas of Canonbury, where camera coverage dropped significantly compared to Upper Street. The search team split into 2 groups. One continued scanning the most likely route toward Canonbury Lane. The other swept the cross streets off Upper Street. Each group had a different scent dog for cross-verification. Deeper into Canonbury, the air grew colder, old brick houses standing silent under rain-soaked trees. Far fewer pedestrians than on the main road. The smell of wet grass, earth, and dripping eaves made it harder for police to isolate relevant signs. Near the edge of Canonbury, the lead dog grew confused. It sniffed one direction then another, but found no consistent trail. The K9 team leader radioed that last night's rain likely washed away Anna's movement traces if she'd passed through. Still, they expanded the search toward Regent's Canal, an open water area that retained scents poorly after rain, but had yielded clues in past disappearances. Bushes along the canal path were thoroughly checked. Officers bending down, shining flashlights into dark crevices between roots and mossy stone walls. Though chances were low, they hoped Anna might have ducked into a rain shelter or dropped something. But after 2 hours, nothing was found. No bag, no shoe, no personal item to indicate her next move. Narrowboats moored silently in the canal, the water flat and reflecting gray skies, giving the whole area an eerie stillness. Police looped back to the area between Upper Street and Canonbury Lane, cross-referencing even faint dog reactions. On the map, they began circling in red, a zone spanning just a few streets, the area they called the Zone of Disappearance. This was the only spot where cameras, dogs, phone signals and witnesses all failed to pinpoint Anna's next path. The investigation team knew that if something had happened to her, it most likely occurred in that narrow space. As the first search wrapped up near noon, police returned to the starting point with a mix of urgency and frustration. They'd followed every field clue the weather allowed, but the result was only the prolonged silence of an otherwise busy neighborhood. No dropped items, no unusual marks, nothing suspicious standing out on the rain-slicked pavement. Just a red zone on the map, the zone Anna had walked into, and then, based on everything they'd gathered that morning, never walked out of again. When the field searches temporarily yielded no additional useful traces, the police shifted their focus to interrogating Anna's acquaintances, hoping to find an anomaly in her behavior, relationships, or schedule that could suggest the next investigative direction. They started with her closest friends, who confirmed that Anna was a highly disciplined person, rarely coming home late without prior notice, and never letting her phone be turned off for extended periods. A housemate said that Anna had no recent personal conflicts, though she occasionally complained about work pressure and a packed schedule. The officers noted that none of them mentioned Anna knowing anyone in the Canonbury area or frequently taking the small roads leading toward it. When the police interrogated her colleagues at the design studio in Shoreditch, one figure immediately drew their attention: Daniel Foster, 29 years old, a male colleague who often worked with Anna on major projects. A few other colleagues described Daniel as overly attentive to Anna, sometimes following her from the office to the train station, even though Anna never complained publicly. Daniel stated that on the evening Anna disappeared, he was working overtime and left the office around 10 p.m., later than the last time Anna was seen at Highbury and Islington Station. However, the vagueness in his initial statements made him the primary suspect, forcing the police to thoroughly check his alibi. When cross-referencing the building's entry-exit card data at the Shoreditch studio, the police discovered that Daniel actually left the office at 9:57 p.m., and cameras in the parking lot also captured him driving his gray hatchback out of the lot in the opposite direction from Anna's route. The investigators continued to verify his journey through phone signals, showing that Daniel headed to Hackney Central shortly afterward to meet a friend at 10:15 p.m. This friend confirmed the meeting time and described how they spent the entire evening just drinking beer at a small pub until nearly midnight. Combining traffic camera data, phone records, and consistent statements, the police were forced to eliminate Daniel from the suspect list, though they kept his file under passive monitoring due to the stalking personality described by colleagues. From Daniel, the police turned back to the last person who saw Anna before she appeared at Highbury and Islington Station, the friend who attended the meetup with her that afternoon. This was a woman named Sophie Hart, a former colleague of Anna's. Sophie recounted that they met at a small cafe near Old Street around 6 p.m. to talk about work and weekend plans. Sophie affirmed that Anna showed no signs of worry or preoccupation. In fact, she even talked about a new design project that excited her greatly. During the meetup, Anna did not mention having plans to meet anyone else that evening, and they parted ways around 8 p.m. When the police asked in detail during a second interview whether anyone followed Anna when she left the cafe, or if there were any strange calls during their conversation, Sophie answered no to both. Her statements were consistent across interviews, with no signs of evasion or ambiguity, and cafe camera footage, along with CCTV. On the route Anna walked to the station confirmed that Sophie left in a different direction. Before ending the interview, Sophie said something that made the investigators take note. Anna was very cautious. She would never talk to strangers on the street, especially in the rain and on busy roads. This remark led the police to note that any interaction between Anna and a stranger, like the vague statement from the taxi driver about seeing her talk to a man standing far away in the rain, if it truly occurred, would go against her inherently careful personality. Therefore, after completing the day's interviews and reviewing all statements from friends, colleagues, and the last person to meet Anna, the police had to admit that there were still no signs of violence or conflict clear enough to indicate she had been threatened before disappearing. There were no items left at the scene, no witnesses to a struggle, no information suggesting Anna was being followed, and except for the taxi driver's vague account of seeing her talk to a man standing at a distance in the rain, every element was too fragile to serve as grounds for a criminal investigation. When the investigation team gathered in the small meeting room at Islington Police Station, the lead investigator had to provide an initial risk assessment based on the existing evidence. He emphasized that although Anna disappeared suddenly and her phone data cut off unusually, both details could still fall into non-criminal scenarios, especially in cases of adults going missing in London, a city where dozens of reports of temporary loss of contact occur daily for various reasons. Reviewing Anna's personal profile, the police found no history of mental health issues, no debts, no family conflicts or complicated romantic relationships, and no evidence that she left the meeting with her friend appearing disturbed or frightened. All of this made upgrading the case to suspected foul play a major obstacle. At the end of the meeting, the lead investigator concluded in the report that there are no indications of criminal activity, and with that conclusion, Anna's disappearance was temporarily not transferred to the Major Crime Unit, the division specializing in high-risk criminal cases. This decision was made in accordance with standard procedures, but it also created a silence that no one in the room voiced. Not upgrading the case meant investigative resources would be more limited, with data retrieval, witness collection, and scene reviews not at absolute emergency levels, as in criminal cases. When the police informed the family of this initial assessment, Anna's parents showed clear disappointment. They sat in the brightly lit public reception room, eyes red from a sleepless night, trying to understand why their daughter's completely unusual disappearance could be seen as a case with no signs of crime. The mother asked, voice trembling, whether the lack of traces was actually a reason to fear more rather than to feel reassured, but the question only received a bland explanation. The police could not conclude anything without specific evidence. The father clenched his hands tightly, trying to stay calm, but the shock was still evident in his eyes. As the family left the police station, the long hallway of Islington Police Station suddenly felt colder, as if that mysterious 8-minute gap was following them out, extending into a silence that no one knew how to fill. It was precisely that unease, combined with the temporary decision not to upgrade the case, that made the Whitford family even more worried, and that worry quickly spread to the community around Islington, Angel, where residents were accustomed to urban life but always sensitive to unusual disappearances. Just 2 days after the family's announcement, hundreds of volunteers, from students, office workers, to local shop owners, gathered spontaneously at major street corners, to print and post missing person flyers throughout the area where Anna was last seen. White sheets bearing her photo, with the words "Missing, have you seen Anna Whitford?" appeared along Upper Street, pasted on bus stops, shop doors, lamp posts, and even the old brick walls around Highbury Fields. Residents began sharing information on social media, while small shops set up donation boxes to help the family print flyers and prepare food for search groups. A group of students from the University of London organized search routes, splitting into teams to cover less frequented areas of Canonbury, scouring parks, alleys, parking lots, and areas around the stairs leading down to Regent's Canal. Many who had witnessed the biting cold and heavy rain of the night Anna disappeared wondered if she might have slipped, sought shelter from the rain, or had an accident in some obscured spot, but all speculations proved meaningless without any traces to confirm her actual path. The police, though not upgrading the case, still sent additional officers to assist the volunteer groups to ensure safe searches. A large map was posted right in front of Islington Police Station, with areas marked in red marker to show where searches had been conducted. But the more red squares were filled in, the more evident the desperation became. No physical evidence, no clothing, no accessories, no handbag, nothing belonging to Anna appeared anywhere. Nevertheless, tips began pouring in continuously from local residents and even those in neighboring areas. A woman said she saw a girl very much like Anna on the Northern Line early in the morning. The police checked the cameras but found no matching images. Another man claimed to have seen Anna in a convenience store near King's Cross. But when viewing the store's CCTV, the woman in the video was noticeably shorter, with much darker hair. Someone even called to say Anna was sitting crying on a bench by Regent's Canal, but when police arrived, it was just another unrelated girl. Such constant false tips not only wasted the search team's time, but also subjected Anna's family to repeated waves of hope, followed by disappointment. Additionally, the posters plastered everywhere began to be torn by rain, edges peeling, causing Anna's image to fade under crumpled paper. A symbol of the community's growing helplessness as days passed without progress. Still, no one wanted to give up. By the end of the first weekend after Anna disappeared, over 200 people gathered on a grassy area near Islington Green to split into groups for continued searches. They walked along lesser-known paths, shining flashlights into dark spaces between stone walls, searching thick bushes along walkways. But each time the search parties returned to the starting point, the empty silence of the neighborhood seemed to swallow all efforts. Not a single item was found, no reliable witness emerged, every trace dissolved into the rain and the city's dim light. A shop owner on Upper Street, who had said he saw Anna pass by every day on her way to work, described the feeling of her sudden absence as an inexplicable void in a place that was always bustling. Anna's disappearance was unlike cases of adults leaving home intentionally. It was like a shadow erased from the map, leaving no echo. As the first week of searching ended, volunteers began to tire, many returning to their daily jobs, and participation numbers gradually declined. New posters were still put up each morning, but passers-by's eyes, initially curious and sympathetic, gradually became accustomed, even indifferent. Slowly, the case began to lose its urgency, and the name Anna Whitford, once ubiquitous on every corner, started sinking into the familiar noise of a city that never stops. Into early 2010, after many months of searching with no new discoveries or leads, Anna Whitford's disappearance slowly drifted into the familiar orbit of unresolved cases, where time becomes the thing that gradually blurs all initial efforts and perseverance from both the community and the investigation team. The posters that once covered Islington, Angel now only had a few remaining, edges faded, stuck to lamp posts like remnants of a hope that had slowly waned. Residents, though still remembering Anna's name, began accepting the reality that they could do nothing more than wait. In the small meeting room at Islington Police Station, the investigators reviewed the entire file one last time to assess the possibility of continuing active investigation. But all reports ended with the same conclusion: no physical evidence, no new witnesses, no phone data, no signs of financial transactions, no signals proving Anna was present anywhere after the evening of October 16th. The 8-minute gap in the CCTV footage remained an unanswered question, and despite the tech team's attempts to enhance the video quality, the images were still too blurry to identify anyone beyond the silhouette of Anna's light coat and the bus obstructing the view. The lead investigator, who had followed the case from the start, sat pensively before the timeline board covered in notes, but with no arrows leading to a clear direction. He understood that the case was entering a stalled state, not due to lack of effort, but because there was nothing left to follow. Many colleagues on the team remarked that no missing person case in years had left so few traces. Under pressure from newer, more urgent cases, along with personnel constraints, superiors decided to reassign the lead investigator to a complicated domestic violence case needing oversight. That decision was announced in a brief meeting, where no one said it aloud, but everyone understood its meaning. The priority given to Anna's case had ended. As he stood to gather the now thick file, his face showed the helplessness that any seasoned investigator had experienced, the gnawing regret of leaving an unsolved case behind, with questions hanging in the air. After the lead investigator left the assignment, Anna's file was reviewed one final time per procedure before being transferred to the long-term missing persons unit, the division handling prolonged disappearances without signs of crime or investigative progress. In the transfer report, Anna's case was noted: no substantial new leads, no confirmed sightings, active search exhausted. Those concise lines, when placed against the real story of a young woman's mysterious disappearance in the heart of London, created a strange paradox. A city with thousands of cameras, tens of thousands of people passing daily, yet just one street corner obscured by rain and yellow lights, and a person could vanish into the void as if they had never walked there. The Whitford family received official notification that the case would be frozen, meaning it would only be revisited with new information or relevant evidence. The mother cried silently, while the father tried to stay composed, but his shoulders trembled slightly as the public liaison officer explained that this was not an end, just a pause due to lack of data. However, as they stepped out of the police station, the dim light of a winter afternoon shining on the damp, cold street made them realize that this pause could last indefinitely. For them, transferring their daughter's file to the long-term missing persons unit was not just an administrative step, it was a painful confirmation that Anna, at least at that moment, had become a name on the list of those who disappeared without a trace. One of the mysteries that the city sometimes lacks the patience to continue pursuing answers for. When Anna Whitford's case was transferred to the long-term missing persons unit, time began to coil into quiet circles, and with each passing year, the disappearance that had once shaken Islington Angel gradually sank beneath new events, new streets, and new names appearing on the evening news. But for the Whitford family, time not only failed to ease the pain but deepened it, as the prolonged silence left them never knowing where to place their hope or their hurt. Every year, on October 16th, they sent a petition letter to the London Metropolitan Police, requesting a review of Anna's file, not because they were certain something new would emerge, but because they feared their daughter would be forgotten if they did not keep speaking out. Those letters were kept in the file, marked as a kind of emotional update that the cold case unit noted but could respond to only minimally, since throughout the first decade, no clue emerged strong enough to spark any new investigative direction. Yet, as the 2010s progressed, criminal investigation technology in the UK advanced in ways that 2009 investigators could never have imagined. Forensic soil analysis, previously limited to identifying basic soil composition or burial environment, could now analyze trace mineral signatures to infer the time a body had been underground with greater accuracy. Degraded DNA recovery, the technique of extracting DNA samples broken down in moist or contaminated environments, became a breakthrough tool, especially in long-term missing persons cases, where even a single hair or skin cell left behind could open new leads. But most importantly, advancements in enhancing CCTV footage, new algorithms capable of restoring blurry video, increasing contrast, reconstructing partially obscured figures in frames, things the 2009 team could never achieve with the simple software of that era. The Cold Case Unit, responsible for reviewing hundreds of long-term missing persons cases across Greater London, began implementing a project to reclassify files by similarity patterns: disappearances while walking at night, disappearances in residential areas with dense camera coverage but insufficient recorded data, disappearances linked to bad weather, and especially those occurring in camera blind spots. A new concept analysts began using upon realizing that areas considered well covered by cameras still had intersections of streetlights, buses, and angles that prevented full recording of pedestrian activity. Anna's file, with its 8-minute gap between two cameras on Canonbury Lane, became a textbook example of this type of case. Though the file was not officially reopened, once a year, analysts in the Cold Case Unit still reviewed similar patterned disappearances, cross-referencing them with Anna's case to check for any connections in behavior, perpetrator, or approach method. In the process, they also updated the file by digitizing all old documents, converting outdated CCTV tapes to new storage formats, and uploading them to the Technical Lab's image analysis system. The video segments that in 2009 were just blurred patches of rain and streetlight glow could now be sharpened to a certain degree. A young analyst, newly hired in 2018, recounted watching the camera footage from the intersection where Anna turned onto Canonbury Lane more than 50 times, searching for the slightest change in brightness or the shape of a shadow behind her. Because these types of disappearances sometimes hinge on a movement too quick or too faint to alter the entire initial assessment. However, even with brightening, contrast enhancement, and algorithmic reconstruction, the video remained too unclear to confirm anything. Meanwhile, the Whitford family continued to keep Anna's presence alive in the public eye in every way they could. Each year, they sent letters to newspapers and missing persons television programs, requesting that Anna's photo be republished around the anniversary of her disappearance. Some local papers still mentioned the case as a classic example of a stagnant but unforgettable file, contrasting a young woman vanishing in the heart of London with a dense camera system that should have captured more. But despite all efforts, there were no new witnesses, no new DNA samples, no belongings surfacing from some forgotten area. The city, with its millions of footsteps each day, had gradually swallowed the last fragile traces. Within the Cold Case Unit, veteran investigators sometimes still mentioned Anna's case at the end of the workday as an example of the imperfections in technology and surveillance systems at that time. One officer who had worked the original case said he couldn't believe someone could vanish just around a corner without anyone seeing. Yet he also admitted that if CCTV had been higher quality or stored longer back then, things might have been different. Currently, Anna's file resides in an encrypted digital archive, alongside hundreds of others awaiting a chance to be reopened. And though dozens of new cases are added to the long-term missing persons list each year, the name Anna Whitford is always marked with a special flag in the system, a case highly relevant to new recovery technologies, one that if the world of 2009 had been just a little more advanced, might not have had to wait so long to be reconsidered. Though there is no clear reason yet to restart the investigation, the combination of new technology, the family's persistence, and the Cold Case Unit's ongoing development of behavioral pattern reanalysis models has quietly placed Anna's case in an orbit where one day, though they don't know when, it could be opened again. In early March 2019, when Anna's file had lain dormant for nearly a decade in the Long-Term Missing Persons Unit's data archive, a completely unexpected event occurred at Woodberry Wetlands in North London, a vast nature reserve where gravel paths wind around the water, regularly welcoming joggers and families with children on weekends. At a small construction site on the edge of the reserve, a crew was excavating foundations for a new pumping station in the drainage system. It was a cloudy morning, the ground still wet from the previous night's rain, making the soil softer than usual, and the digging progress faster than anticipated. Around 10 a.m., one of the workers, a middle-aged man named Malik, brought his shovel down into the third layer of soil when the blade struck something that didn't belong among the dirt and rocks. Malik paused, bent down and gently brushed aside the damp soil with his hand. Soon after, a tiny bone fragment appeared, caked in dirt and stained deep brown. At first, Malik thought it was just animal bone, not uncommon in areas near warehouses or wastelands. But as he continued brushing, a longer bone emerged, curved with the rounded end characteristic of a human arm bone. Malik immediately called his colleagues, and the site foreman quickly ordered work halted. The area cordoned off, and the police notified. Within 30 minutes, officers from Stoke Newington Police Station arrived, requiring all personnel to leave the excavation pit and preserve the scene. When a forensic examiner arrived, she needed only a glance lasting a few seconds to determine these were definitely adult human bones, heavily decomposed over many years. News of human remains near Woodberry Wetlands quickly stirred the area. Police set up barriers, covered the site with tarps, and asked passers-by not to take photos or approach. The Met Police's specialized unit for handling old remains was mobilized. As they began expanding the excavation, more bone parts gradually emerged from the soft soil, leg bones, ribs, and finally the skull, which had lost nearly all soft tissue, leaving only a pale bone mass under the lights. Around the skeleton, forensics found a few scraps of rotted fabric, a pale-colored piece that might once have been a jacket or shirt, and some synthetic fibers stuck in the dirt. All were heavily decayed, their original structure almost unrecognizable. The shallow burial, less than 30 centimeters deep, led forensics to conclude that the person who buried the body lacked experience or acted hastily and furtively, very likely using only hands or crude tools. Beneath the soil near the skull, a small oxidized metal object was found, seemingly a button or piece of jewelry left behind after many years. Forensics collected all evidence and carefully transported the remains to a specialized examination lab. Police immediately reviewed missing persons lists from the area over the past 10 years. When the preliminary report indicated the sex and age of the bones matched a young woman missing for about a decade, the name Anna Whitford stood out above all. Just days later, dental analysis concluded that the skeletal teeth structure perfectly matched Anna's dental records provided by the family in 2009. For final confirmation, forensics conducted DNA testing on the best-preserved bone fragment, using degraded DNA recovery techniques that had advanced dramatically over the decade. Though the sample was degraded and contaminated, the results still showed a complete match with the mother's DNA. An undeniable confirmation, the remains found at Woodberry Wetlands were those of Anna Whitford. In the meeting room at Islington Police Station, when the report was printed and placed on the table, the atmosphere was tense as a drawn string. Officers who had worked the 2009 case fell silent for a long time, each understanding the significance of this discovery. More than 10 years after Anna vanished in the 8-minute gap, her body had finally been found, not in some distant place, but right in the heart of an area thousands still passed through each week. The fact that Anna's remains had lain there all that time, just a few hundred meters from busy roads, sent chills through everyone. The news was quickly conveyed to the Whitford family. The mother nearly collapsed upon hearing the phone call, while the father, though long prepared mentally, still had to sit down as his legs suddenly gave way. They had never stopped hoping for a miracle, but they also understood that one day, the truth would surface, whatever form it took. In the following days, Woodberry Wetlands was filled with police, examiners, and scene surveyors. Every layer of soil was sifted, every scrap of fabric, every grain of sand meticulously collected. Environmental data around the remains was analyzed to determine how long the body had been there, whether it had been dug up and reburied elsewhere. Preliminary assessments indicated the remains had been underground for many years with little disturbance, suggesting the burial site was likely where the body was first placed. Every new forensic tool was brought in to compensate for what couldn't be done in 2009. This discovery, though it answered none of the big questions about what happened to Anna on the night she vanished, revived the entire file that had seemed dormant for a decade. And the silence of the skeleton, each scattered piece, each gap in the structure seemed to whisper, demanding an answer the city had owed Anna for so long. The analysis of Anna Whitford's remains at the Met Police's modern forensic lab proceeded in silence, with an atmosphere heavy with absolute focus. Technicians sequentially placed each bone on the stainless steel table, reassembling the body structure based on comparative anatomical references and images from the scene. Though buried for nearly 10 years, the skeleton retained many important signs, allowing experts to infer circumstances of death, though the final conclusions remained highly cautious due to the absence of soft tissue for direct injury observation. From the very first hours, forensics determined one thing that disappointed both the family and the investigators who had followed the case closely: Anna's cause of death could not be clearly established from the skeleton. There were no skull fractures, no major bone breaks, no cuts or impact marks, suggesting she was killed by direct violence. But the silence of the bones did not mean a lack of clues. On the contrary, sometimes what was absent opened more important questions. On Anna's wrist bones, examiners detected a faint but uniform ligature mark, precisely where a thin cord or binding material might have wrapped around. Under the electron microscope, the bone surface showed small parallel abrasion lines, like friction created when a restraint was pulled tight. This was not a natural sign or a decomposition artifact. It was a clear indicator suggesting Anna may have been bound by the hands just before death. Though it could not be confirmed that the binding caused her death, this mark completely contradicted the initial hypothesis that she had simply met with an accident or left voluntarily. Alongside bone analysis, the forensic soil team examined the dirt adhering to the long bones, especially the legs and spine, areas that often retain soil from the time of burial. Results showed the minerals in the adhering dirt perfectly matched the surface soil layer at Woodberry Wetlands, not deeper layers. This led to a clear conclusion: Anna's body was buried shallowly on the night or very soon after her disappearance. There were no signs of the body being moved multiple times, no unusual soil distribution indicating reburial later. In other words, the discovery site was very likely where the body was first placed. The consistency of the adhering soil also ruled out the possibility of dumping after holding the body for a long period. The person who left the body at Woodberry Wetlands seemed to have no intent for sophisticated concealment or complex techniques. They acted quickly, hastily, and likely just wanted to move the body to a less frequented spot in the dark. During the enzyme-based cleaning of the bones to detach remaining organic fibers, a technician discovered a small object almost fused to the back of a rib bone. At first, they thought it was a root, but when removed under the microscope, the fibrous structure revealed something remarkable. It was a human hair several centimeters long, much darker than Anna's described light brown hair. What excited the forensic team even more was the hair root, though heavily eroded, still retained enough dead cell markers, a rarity for remains decomposed outdoors for over 10 years. Degraded DNA recovery was applied immediately. In many cases, DNA from hair, after more than 10 years, is completely fragmented and unreadable. But this time, though most sequences were lost, the sample retained a short segment sufficient to identify gender and a few key genetic markers. The printed lab results left everyone silent. The DNA on the hair was male. It did not match any control data in the lab, nor any family member of Anna's. This was not family hair, not a technician's, not random environmental contamination. It was a foreign sample found on the remains of a missing woman for 10 years. Experts assessed that the hair's adhesion location on the back of the rib, under uniform dirt coverage, almost certainly indicated contact with the body very near the time of death or during movement and burial. Possibilities like hair drifting in water, animal hair, or environmental debris were completely ruled out. A male hair on the body of a woman who disappeared under unclear circumstances was a breakthrough clue. If the DNA could be further recovered or matched to any stored database, it could lead to the identity of the person with Anna in her final hours. And in the context of a case with almost no physical evidence, no witnesses, no clear CCTV images, such a tiny clue could sometimes shift the entire investigative trajectory that no one had touched for 10 years. One technician, peering at the hair through the microscope, whispered, "If anything can still say something about that night, it's this." And indeed, amid the skeleton silence, that hair became the first sign proving Anna was not alone in her final hours, and that someone, though vanished from all cameras and statements, had left a trace time could not erase. When the forensic report from the lab was transferred to the cold case unit, the information about the male hair that still retained partial DNA became the catalyst that led the unit to decide to reopen the entire file on Anna Whitford for the first time since 2009. The combination of ligature marks on the wrist bones, the conclusion that the body was buried on the very night of the disappearance, and the presence of a foreign biological trace prompted the lead investigator of the cold case unit, a person known for being extremely cautious about restarting old cases, to conclude that this was no longer just an unsolved missing person case. It was a case likely involving criminal activity that the previous generation of investigative technology had not been capable of detecting. Their first decision was to re-examine all CCTV data from 2009 using the latest image recovery systems, particularly the video segment that had been corrupted and stored in the file with the note unusable. That was footage from a camera on an old office building at the corner of Canonbury Lane, which was considered to have a direct view of the area where Anna disappeared, but could not be used in 2009 due to codec errors and damage to the storage disk. For many years, no one thought that video could be opened, but data recovery technology in 2019 was vastly different. An imaging engineer ran the original file through specialized decoding software and reconstructed each damaged frame. After hours of processing, the screen finally displayed a blurry, slightly shaky video, but one where the shapes of people moving in the rain could still be distinguished. Beneath the heavy noise, Anna's figure appeared, still in her light-colored trench coat, walking hurriedly. But what silenced the entire room was the figure walking right behind her, only about 3 to 4 meters away. In 2009, this figure had gone completely unnoticed because the video could not be opened. Now, though the face and clothing details were lost, the tall stature, slightly forward-leaning posture, long and even stride stood out more clearly than any witness description. Notably, this figure appeared just before the moment a bus passed by, after which both disappeared from view, and then only Anna reappeared on the traffic camera before being obscured. This raised a major question: was the man behind her following randomly or with intent? AI-based gait recognition software was brought in. This new system did not require a face or clear image. It relied on body proportions, step speed, torso angle, and movement rhythm to create a unique gait signature for each individual. Despite the blurry video and rain distortion, the AI isolated about 10 seconds of the figure's movement. From that, it generated 3 key parameters: estimated height of about 1.82 to 1.87 meters, slim build, and a slight inward rotation of the left foot. Additionally, the figure's movement speed nearly matched Anna's, only half a beat slower, a characteristic often seen in people following to observe or approach a target without wanting to walk alongside. The analysis report was sent back to the cold case unit team, and they began cross-referencing the gait signature with a list of hundreds of people who lived or worked near Canonbury in 2009. The Met Police's AI system had digitized years of CCTV data, allowing them to filter for individuals who had appeared on cameras around the disappearance area during that time frame. The process of narrowing the list took several days, combining algorithms with manual evaluation by experienced investigators. Ultimately, from over 300 people within a 1-mile radius of where Anna disappeared, only 3 had gaits matching the AI reconstructed model, all male, all living within a few minutes' walk of Canonbury Lane in 2009, and all with heights consistent with the estimated range. The first was a seasonal delivery worker who had worked at a shop on Upper Street. His gait in 2009 camera footage had some similarities, but the speed and foot rhythm did not fully match. The second was a young doctor who lived in an apartment block near Canonbury Road. He appeared a few times on residential cameras in the days before and after Anna's disappearance. Though his gait was quite similar, he had evidence of a business trip lasting from the evening of October 16th to the next morning, making it unlikely he was at the scene. The third, however, drew particular attention from the team, a man named Mark Ellison, who lived in a small apartment just a 5-minute walk from the zone of disappearance in 2009. On camera at Highbury and Islington Station from a minor incident a few months earlier, Mark briefly appeared in a blurry video segment. When the AI compared his gait from that old video to the figure closely following Anna, the similarity ratio was the highest of the three subjects. Additionally, the slight inward rotation of his left foot when walking quickly matched the AI analysis almost perfectly. Though the system could not confirm identity, it suggested Mark was a subject warranting deeper examination. The investigators, accustomed to caution in cold cases, remained prudent, but they could not ignore the argument that if someone was walking right behind Anna in her final moments, that person might be the key to the entire mystery that had lasted a decade. And as a paradox of time, the video once deemed useless in 2009 now became the first brick in rebuilding a timeline that had collapsed nearly a decade ago, opening a path that no one previously had the tools to see. After the AI system narrowed down 3 individuals with gaits compatible with the figure appearing in the recovered CCTV footage, the cold case unit team moved to the residency cross-check, a meticulous process to determine which of the hundreds of residents and workers around Canonbury Lane in 2009 could have been present at the exact time and location matching Anna's movement path. All residency data from that year was retrieved from council records, temporary residence lists, private apartment rental logs, and employee reports from businesses within a 1-mile radius of Anna's disappearance point. Filtering this data was challenging because people moved frequently. Many shops had changed owners, and some 2009 electronic records were stored in outdated formats, forcing the technical team to recover them piece by piece. Nevertheless, when the final list was narrowed to about 50 people present in the area at the right time, Mark Ellison's name stood out above all. Mark, then 31 years old, was an art teacher at a private drawing center in Angel. Residency records showed he lived in a small apartment on Cromwell Road, just a 5-minute walk from the zone of disappearance, and often returned home via a route crossing Canonbury Lane, the same direction Anna had taken on the night she disappeared. This, combined with the AI results showing his gait, had the highest similarity ratio to the figure in the video, led investigators to focus more on Mark's background. When reviewing historical records, the team discovered that Mark was not entirely unknown to police. In July 2009, a minor report was filed with Islington Police Station regarding behavior described as strange toward a female student at the art center. According to the statement at the time, Mark was alleged to have followed this student several blocks after an evening class, frightening her enough to report it to the center's manager. However, when police approached, the woman declined to file a formal complaint, saying she might have overreacted. With no complaint, the incident was logged as a concern report and not pursued further. Mark himself explained that he was simply heading home in the same direction and had no intention of pressuring or stalking anyone, and since there was no evidence of law-breaking, the matter was quickly dropped. But viewed through the lens of a mysterious disappearance, this detail was no longer minor. The 2009 report indicated Mark was frequently in the area in the evenings and had once made a woman feel followed, a behavior notably similar to the figure walking close behind Anna in the video. Investigators continued cross-referencing Mark's work records. His 2009 schedule showed classes typically ending around 20 o'clock or 20:30, depending on the day. On October 16th, the center's log recorded Mark finishing class at 19:45, giving him enough time to leave Angel, walk or take a bus to the area near Upper Street, and then head home via Canonbury, within the time frame matching Anna's route. Oyster card data from that era was no longer stored, but a camera outside the art center happened to capture the figure of a man in a dark coat, similar build, leaving the building just after 1950. Though the video quality was too low for identification, the direction of movement led toward Angel Station, where Mark often took the tube or walked through side streets back to Cromwell Road. When the investigation team pieced all the data together, proximity of residents to Anna's disappearance area, compatible travel habits, an unprocessed unusual behavior report, and gait analysis results, Mark became the most fitting subject for closer scrutiny on the shortlist. Importantly, his personal record showed no prior convictions, no clear violent behavior, and he was described by many colleagues as quiet and reserved. It was precisely this ordinariness that made him hard to notice, that caused him to be overlooked in the initial investigation, especially since no witnesses remembered seeing him at the scene. Acquaintances from that time said Mark lived alone, liked working late, and often wandered on foot after classes to find painting inspiration. These vague habits, unremarkable when viewed in isolation, suddenly became suspicious when aligned with the timing of Anna's disappearance. When the cold case unit completed cross-checking the residency and work lists, they concluded that of the 3 subjects proposed by AI, only Mark Ellison met all the geographic, temporal and behavioral criteria to be escalated for in-depth scrutiny. And though nothing could yet be confirmed, the re-emergence of the name Mark Ellison, a name that had only briefly appeared in a vague 2009 report, made the investigators realize that the story of Anna's disappearance might be far more complex than the initial file suggested. It was this realization that paved the way for the next step. When Mark Ellison was escalated for in-depth scrutiny, the cold case unit immediately expanded the scope of analysis, not just based on residency and gait, but also leveraging technological data that in 2009 they had no opportunity to fully utilize. One of the most important sources was old cell tower data, raw logs previously downplayed due to low accuracy, but with new analysis systems, they could reconstruct a device's activity radius over short periods. When retrieving data related to Mark's phone subscriber records, the team discovered a notable detail. On the evening of October 16, 2009, Mark's phone pinged a cell tower near Canonbury Road between 2040 and 2110, exactly matching the time frame Anna was last seen on CCTV and the 8-minute gap between cameras. Though cell towers could not pinpoint exact location, its coverage area fully encompassed where Anna disappeared. This directly contradicted Mark's 2009 statement. At the time, he claimed to have gone straight home after class, leaving Angel around 1950 and not leaving his apartment again that evening. He said he was tired and wanted to rest, and since he was not considered a suspect, police did not cross-check further. But the new data proved his phone was active nearly a 10-minute walk from his home at the case's most critical moment. The team flagged this as the first and most significant inconsistency in Mark's statement. From there, they examined factors that might explain why he was near Canonbury that evening. His 2009 work records indicated he often walked home via varying routes depending on his mood. However, the route from Angel to Cromwell Road he had described did not need to pass through Canonbury Lane or the zone of disappearance. His presence at the nearby cell tower suggested he likely changed his route or had reason to be in an area not on his usual way home. For deeper insight, the analysis team began reconstructing movement models based on all available sources: home location, work location, cell tower, walking habits, and step speed identified by AI from CCTV. The reconstruction software simulated 3 scenarios: optimal route, shortcut route, and following another person route. In all 3, results indicated that if Mark left Angel at 1950 and was in the Canonbury Road cell tower coverage around 2040, he most likely traveled via a route crossing Upper Street, the same direction Anna took. This became significant when the team overlaid the recovered CCTV data onto the reconstructed route map. The figure appearing behind Anna in the office building video had height and build similar to Mark, and its appearance location lay exactly on the route the software simulated he might have taken. In other words, if Mark truly left Angel and walked home that evening, the route he chose aligned perfectly with the path Anna took before disappearing, a coincidence the investigators could not ignore. The analysis team also re-examined Mark's July 2009 behavior report. In it, the witness described him following the student while maintaining even distance, neither overtaking nor falling back, a habit that behavioral psychology experts note is common in those observing a target from afar without revealing stalking intent. Combining this with the video figure's gait, always 3 to 4 meters behind Anna, they began questioning whether this habit repeated on October 16. All factors remained circumstantial, not conclusive, but they painted an increasingly clear picture. Mark Ellison was near where Anna disappeared, at the critical time along a highly probable matching route, and his 2009 statement did not align with objective data. To expand analysis, the team used layer analysis, overlaying real-time factors like weather, street lighting, pedestrian density, and train schedules onto the two routes map. They noted that when bus number 30 obscured the camera view, pedestrian traffic was thinner, making an approach or following less noticeable. In the reconstruction model, the intersection of Anna's and Mark's probable routes aligned almost perfectly at the Upper Street and Canonbury Lane junction. More importantly, the route the software simulated Mark might continue on after the intersection, if he did not turn toward home, led straight to the area bordering Woodberry Wetlands, where Anna's remains were later found. Though not direct evidence, the alignment between the 2009 movement model and the discovery site was weighty, proving Mark's presence in the radius that night was no longer random coincidence. When the team completed their in-depth report on Mark Ellison's behavior and movement, they understood the picture was still incomplete, but the data layers, from cell tower, CCTV, route modeling to behavioral history, had stacked in a way that could not be dismissed. And it was this convergence that convinced the investigators it was time to take another step to truly understand where Mark Ellison was, what he was doing, and why he appeared on the night a young woman vanished from London without a trace. When the report analyzing Mark Ellison's behavior and movement patterns was submitted to the leadership of the Cold Case Unit, the decision to place Mark under passive surveillance was immediately issued. According to the updated residency records, Mark had left the apartment on Cromwell Road in 2016 and was now living in temporary rental housing in Stoke Newington, but many of his old belongings were still stored in the shared storage unit of the old building. It was right there that an unexpected development occurred, one not orchestrated by the police, but stemming from a rare coincidence. The new owner of the building on Cromwell Road was undertaking a comprehensive renovation and required the complete clearance of the old storage area, where previous residents had left behind various items. A cleaning company was hired to sort and dispose of the belongings. While checking a dusty corner piled with moldy cardboard boxes, a cleaner named Javier accidentally pulled out a rusted silver metal box that was heavy and old, with the lid almost fused to the body. Noticing a faded label on the outside with handwritten initials, "Me," the storage manager immediately checked the list of former residents and recognized that the initials matched Mark Ellison's name. Since the building had received a request from the police to retain any items potentially related to old cases, the manager promptly notified the investigation team. When the police arrived, they carefully sealed the metal box and transported it to the evidence analysis lab. Under cold white lights, technicians used specialized tools to gently pry open the lid. Inside, unlike typical keepsakes or ordinary documents, they discovered 3 prominent items: a thin length of beige rope with fine fibers that was frayed but still intact in structure, a folded paper map of the Regent's Canal area, the very canal running through northern London, marked with red pen circles around 4 points of unclear purpose, and finally, a single silver earring with a broken clasp covered in a fine layer of dust, as if it had been forgotten for years. None of these items were recorded in Mark's personal files, and their presence in a concealed metal box heightened the investigation team's alertness. In particular, the region's canal map was the detail that drew the strongest attention. The canal route extends through many areas, including Woodberry Wetlands, where Anna's body was discovered. The fact that an old map with handwritten marks on points very close to the body discovery site prompted investigators to immediately escalate the priority of analysis. The rope segment was sent directly to the forensics lab for DNA testing, while the earring was cleaned, photographed, and compared to images of accessories Anna had worn. Meanwhile, the map was spread out on a table, the red circles enlarged, and compared against 2009 map data to determine their significance. Upon close examination of the earring, experts noted it resembled the style Anna wore in a photo she sent to a close friend just days before her disappearance. Although absolute confirmation was impossible, since such accessories were common, the wear pattern on the broken part and the design features showed multiple suspicious similarities. At the same time, the forensics lab reported traces of DNA on the rope, matched perfectly with Anna Whitford's DNA sample. The traces were on the stretched fibers, indicating the rope had direct contact with her skin. This aligned with the ligature marks found on the wrist bones in the previous autopsy. Moreover, the rope also showed very faint DNA traces from a male individual, unidentified because the sample was too degraded for full analysis, but the presence of male DNA reinforced suspicions that the rope had been used in a criminal context. When this information was relayed back to the investigation team, the connections between the evidence became too clear to dismiss. A map marked in areas related to the body discovery site, an earring similar to one Anna wore, a rope segment bearing her DNA, all contained in a metal box belonging to the only person whose behavior, route, history, and cell tower data matched the mysterious 8-minute window in the case. Even seasoned investigators accustomed to discrepancies in old evidence had to acknowledge that the probability of a randomly forgotten metal box containing 3 items linked to a missing person from 10 years ago was virtually zero. When piecing together the timing, location, and nature of the evidence, they realized they were standing at a critical threshold in the investigation. Although no conclusions could yet be declared, one thing became certain: that dusty metal box had shattered the 10-year silence of the case, raising questions about Mark Ellison's role in the night Anna disappeared that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or speculation. The evidence in the box did not merely carry traces of the past, they were the first tangible pieces of a picture that the city had thought forgotten, now suddenly emerging clearly before the investigators. Therefore, when the analysis process was completed and the report confirmed Anna's DNA on the rope segment, the cold case unit understood that the moment for direct confrontation had arrived, and they decided to summon Mark Ellison for formal questioning. The session took place in a small, coldly lit interrogation room, where Mark sat upright, but with his hands clasped tightly in tension. From the very first question, Mark asserted that he had nothing to do with Anna Whitford's disappearance, and claimed that his name appearing on the review list was an incomprehensible mistake. When the investigator presented that cell tower data showed his phone near Canonbury Road on the evening of October 16, 2009, Mark immediately denied it, saying he was definitely at home that night. But just minutes later, when the investigator pointed out that his 2009 statement said he left Angel after teaching and stopped to shop before heading home, Mark shifted. They heard him say, "Maybe I misremembered, and that perhaps someone borrowed my phone, or it fell somewhere." The constant changes in his statements led the investigator to note immediately, inconsistent alibi. When asked about his route that evening, Mark continued to waver between versions, sometimes saying he went straight home, sometimes that he detoured via Upper Street to buy art supplies, sometimes that he couldn't remember clearly because it was so long ago. This very inconsistency made the investigators clearly sense evasion, especially when contrasted with the reconstructed movement model, showing a high likelihood of him being on the route overlapping Anna's path. While the interrogation was underway, an unexpected development occurred in the support investigation team. Mark's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Helen Grant, after being contacted to verify more of Mark's personal history, proactively called the police back and admitted that in 2009, she had lied to provide him with an alibi. Helen stated that when police asked if Mark was home the evening Anna disappeared, she confirmed he was home all evening, but in reality, she hadn't seen him that day, and only did it because Mark asked her to help smooth things over. This admission was immediately relayed to the interrogation room, adding clear pressure on Mark. When directly asked about Helen's statement, Mark looked down at the table, avoided eye contact, and quietly said, maybe she misunderstood, but offered no specific explanation. From that point, the voice analysis team was requested to monitor Mark's vocal responses in real time. Voice stress analysis, a tool that detects micro-tremors in the voice when the subject feels stress or is concealing information, showed sudden spikes whenever the investigator mentioned Angel Station, where Mark had left the art center that evening. Each time Angel was mentioned, Mark would take a deep breath, his voice becoming strained and his speaking pace slowing, markedly different from the calm demeanor he displayed on other topics. The analysis results also revealed clear stress points when Mark was asked if he had passed through Canonbury Lane that night. Stress indicators spiked sharply, even as he tried to maintain composure. This led the investigators to conclude that although Mark did not directly confess, his voice reacted strongly when key locations in the case were mentioned. As the interrogation stretched beyond an hour, Mark continued to deny everything, saying he didn't know who Anna was, had never met her, and didn't understand why the evidence was linked to him. However, those denials increasingly lacked weight when set against the technical data, physical evidence, and Helen's admission of fabricating an alibi for him. When Mark left the interrogation room with fragmented answers and a constantly shifting alibi, the investigators understood that the contradictions in his statements were no longer details that could be overlooked, but had become a crucial piece in the picture gradually forming around the night Anna disappeared. And it was precisely the accumulation of those contradictions, combined with the evidence found in the metal box showing direct links to Anna Whitford, that forced the cold case unit to take the next step, obtaining an arrest warrant to question Mark Ellison as a suspect rather than a witness. Early on a Tuesday morning, as Mark was entering the art center in Camden, where he had been working part-time since moving from Cromwell Road, a group of plainclothes officers approached him right at the entrance. Witnesses at the scene recounted that Mark briefly froze upon seeing the police badges, but maintained an unusually calm demeanor, even asking what's going on, as if he didn't understand why he was being stopped. Just seconds later, he was handcuffed and read his rights in the procedure, in full view of shocked colleagues and a group of young students arriving for class. The news spread almost immediately. Within an hour, the entire Camden Art Collective was buzzing with talk about Mark's arrest in connection to a woman's disappearance from over 10 years ago. For many who had worked with Mark, it was an unimaginable shock. Mark wasn't the type to draw attention, quiet, punctual, minimally social outside work. Some students described him as gentle, somewhat shy, hard to associate with the image of a suspect in a serious crime. But others recalled a strange coldness in how he kept distance, the lack of a clear social circle, and his solitary habits. Traits previously seen as artistic temperament suddenly became sources of suspicion. The Camden community, small and tightly knit especially in the art world, was thus hit by a clearly divisive shock. Half believed the police had strong enough reasons for the decision, especially since the evidence had been internally disclosed to some center staff under investigation support procedures. The other half thought Mark was merely a victim of misunderstanding or unfortunate coincidence, that someone like him, calm, mild-mannered, with no prior record, could not be involved in a gruesome case spanning a decade. On social media, Camden resident groups shared blurry images of Mark being escorted to a police car, accompanied by countless conflicting comments. Some wrote that it's time the Anna case finally got a lead, while others countered that conclusions couldn't be drawn from an old box of stuff and some vague data. Within 24 hours, national media began covering it extensively. Headlines like "Camden Man Arrested in 2009 Disappearance Case" or "Decade-Old Cold Case Gets First Suspect" dominated online front pages. Television channels aired footage of the art center area where Mark was arrested, along with interviews of students, neighbors, and people who had encountered him in the area. Many journalists even went to Mark's new rental home in Stoke Newington, where neighbors said he lived very privately, didn't interact much, always came and went alone, further shading his image with a layer of suspicion. However, some who had known Mark for years spoke out in his defense, insisting he was just reclusive, disliked noise, and easily misunderstood. Those statements only deepened the community divide, with one side arguing anyone can hide something and the other retorting that you can't judge a person based on rumors and solitude. Meanwhile, police were compelled to hold a brief press conference to confirm that Mark Ellison had been arrested under a valid warrant and was being questioned in the framework of the investigation into Anna Whitford's death. They emphasized that the arrest did not equate to a criminal conclusion, but recently collected evidence provides reasonable grounds to suspect Mr. Ellison's involvement. This statement was quickly repeated by media in evening news broadcasts, drawing even more public attention. Many Camden residents gathered in cafes, pubs, and local markets to discuss the case, some even lingering outside the art center to see if police would return for more records. All of it created an atmosphere of tension, curiosity, and anxiety, a state Camden had not experienced since the initial spread of Anna's disappearance news over a decade earlier. Though no one yet knew what would happen next, it was clear that Mark's arrest had powerfully revived old memories of the case, and the city was once again swept into the unanswered question: what really happened to Anna Whitford on the night she vanished? The trial of Mark Ellison opened in a tense atmosphere enveloping the Central Criminal Court, where both the media and the public focused their attention on a case that had haunted London for over a decade. The prosecution, in their opening statement, emphasized that this was not a case based on a single piece of evidence, but a combination of modern forensic science, behavioral analysis, movement mapping, and physical evidence bearing direct traces of the victim. They presented to the jury the entire investigative process, from Anna's disappearance in the 8-minute gap in 2009 to the discovery of her body at Woodberry Wetlands, and the forensic findings that overturned the initial conclusions. Starting with the forensic report, the prosecution described the ligature marks on Anna's wrist bones, indicating she may have been restrained before death. Concluded that the body was buried shallowly on the very night of her disappearance, and particularly highlighted a male hair-retaining partial DNA found adhered close to her ribs, seen as direct evidence of bodily contact. Next, they presented the CCTV footage recovered using modern technology, footage that in 2009 had been deemed useless. Though the images remained blurry, the prosecution used an AI model to demonstrate that the gait of the shadowy figure, following closely behind Anna, had the highest match ratio with Mark Ellison, compared to any other individual in the area at that time. Then, they moved to the key part, the evidence found in the forgotten metal box. The Regent's Canal map marked by hand at 4 points near the body discovery site. The broken earring with a design matching one Anna had worn, and especially the thin rope segment bearing Anna's DNA. The prosecution argued that the appearance together of 3 items related to a missing victim from years ago in a metal box owned by Mark could not possibly be random coincidence. They also presented cell tower data showing Mark's phone appearing near Canonbury, right in the time frame when Anna vanished, despite his 2009 statement claiming he was home all evening. The prosecution did not hesitate to describe Mark as someone who deliberately distorted the truth, stressing that his alibi changed repeatedly across interrogations, and the admission from his ex-girlfriend Helen Grant, who had previously lied to cover for Mark, showed he had intentionally misled the investigation from the start. Meanwhile, the defense countered by arguing that the entire accusation rested on circumstantial evidence and that there was no proof of Anna's cause of death, a weakness that forensics could not overcome due to the complete decomposition of the body. They emphasized no serious bone injuries, no evidence of violent assault, and no witnesses seeing Mark approach Anna. Regarding the CCTV, the defense asserted the images were too blurry for certain inference, and AI gate analysis was merely a supportive tool, not strong enough to serve as identifying evidence. For the items in the metal box, the defense argued nothing proved. Mark placed those objects there. They suggested Mark had shared the storage unit with dozens of other residents in the building, and anyone could have left the items in the box before he moved out. They also tried to downplay the earring, noting the design was common and could not be absolutely sourced. The defense maintained that the rope with Anna's DNA proved nothing without determining the context of contact, and proposed the hypothesis that it could have been contaminated with DNA after the body decomposed in the soil or through other environmental processes. These arguments made the trial intensely tense, with the jury constantly taking notes and the judge repeatedly requiring both sides to focus on evidence rather than excessive speculation. However, the prosecution maintained the initiative by introducing the final evidence, a new forensic report completed after multiple deeper analyses of the male hair found under the soil layer close to Anna's ribs. In the report, the lab confirmed that although the DNA sample was heavily degraded, 3 sequence segments remained sufficient for comparison with Mark Ellison's DNA profile. Result: 99.87% match. Silence fell over the courtroom as this figure was read out. The defense tried to argue the DNA sample was too small for absolute reliability, but the prosecution immediately rebutted, explaining that the match ratio virtually ruled out it being the DNA of any random male individual. More importantly, the prosecution stressed the hair's position on the back of the ribs, pressed tightly by soil for years, could not result from ordinary contamination or post-decomposition handling by others. This indicated the hair contacted Anna's body near the time of death or during body transport. The prosecution concluded there was no reasonable explanation other than Mark being present with Anna in her final hours, and his prolonged silence over the years reflected concealment rather than innocence. As the trial entered its final day, the jury was asked to consider all the evidence: forensics, reconstructed timeline, physical items, and especially the hair bearing Mark's DNA. And with a combination of forensic science and exposed lies, the balance of their judgment began tilting toward one side, the side that for over a decade, Anna Whitford's case had never achieved. The verdict for Mark Ellison created widespread shockwaves across Camden and Islington, the two areas closely tied to Anna Whitford's final journey, and also where Mark had lived and worked for many years. Though the court reached its conclusion based on a complex chain of forensic evidence, the community remained clearly divided into two emotional camps. In Camden, where Mark had taught, many former students and colleagues expressed shock that someone they had seen as quiet and harmless was convicted in a case spanning a decade. Some spoke out, claiming Mark was a victim of circumstances, that the evidence, though strong, was still circumstantial and open to multiple interpretations, especially since Anna's cause of death was not clearly determined. In contrast, many Islington residents, who had witnessed and participated in the search for Anna in 2009, viewed the verdict as closure for a collective wound. They believed that though the case never revealed the full sequence of events, the basic truth had been illuminated. Anna did not vanish voluntarily. Someone was with her and left undeniable traces. On social media, the divide deepened further. Some wrote that justice had finally been served for Anna. Others called it a verdict based more on gaps than clarity. Debates raged for weeks, with some calling for a reinvestigation with higher standards, while others demanded respect for the court's decision and the victim's family. For the Whitford family, the verdict brought relief mixed with pain. They knew nothing could bring Anna back, and the sentence could not fully answer the questions that had haunted them for 10 years. What did Anna go through? Why did she fall into the hands of the person who led her to that fate? They recognized that the gaps in their daughter's story would forever remain unfilled. But precisely because of that, they decided to transform their loss into something more meaningful. A few months after the verdict, they established the Anna Whitford Fund, a nonprofit organization to support families of missing persons, helping them access legal, technological, and psychological resources from the earliest days, so no family would endure the prolonged isolation they had experienced. The fund also sponsors training in using urban surveillance technology and new forensic tools to aid independent searches, especially in under-resourced communities. In Islington, a group of residents and volunteers who had joined the search for Anna in 2009 proposed erecting a small memorial plaque at Angel Station, where she was last seen before embarking on a journey no one fully understands. The metal plaque, simple yet elegant, bears the inscription, "In memory of Anna Whitford, may every missing voice be heard." Every year on October 16th, family, friends, and many Londoners light candles beneath the plaque, not only to remember Anna, but also to remind each other that in a bustling city, some people vanish unseen, and justice sometimes takes a decade to find its way back. Yet even after the verdict, Anna's story retains the nature of a cold case. No one but Mark Ellison can recount what happened in those 8 minutes, where the camera light was obscured. No one knows what Anna said, felt, or how she tried to resist. And no one knows the moment that pushed her from life. Only that her traces vanished precisely where London becomes most silent. That very gap, the gap that time, science, and law cannot fill, becomes the story's conclusion. Not an affirmation, not a complete resolution, but an acceptance that sometimes urban mysteries can only be understood through what they do not say. And in that silence, the true legacy the case leaves is not in the final verdict, but in reminding the entire community that missing persons cases never belong solely to the past. They continue to live in memory, in vigilance, and in the hearts of those who always believe that every story, no matter how incomplete, deserves to be heard. The story of the Anna Whitford case not only stirs up painful memories for a community, but also reflects many thought-provoking aspects of life in the United Kingdom today. Particularly in a modern urban society where the fast pace of life and community bonds are gradually fading. One of the most critical details is the 8-minute gap between the two cameras, a brief period of time that became a fateful blind spot where all traces of Anna vanished. In the current context, it reminds us that personal safety is not something to be taken for granted, even in busy areas like Islington or Camden. The fact that Anna left Angel Station on an ordinary evening, just like thousands of others do every day, but never returned, serves as a powerful reminder that complacency can lead to irreversible consequences. The second lesson comes from the initial delay in assessing the case's risk. Because there were no clear signs of violence, the police did not escalate the missing person report to the major crime unit, resulting in the loss of valuable time in the investigation. In a society like the UK, where investigative resources are limited, training authorities to recognize soft signals is essential. Finally, the community's silence over many years before the evidence was discovered highlights the importance of speaking up. If Mark's ex-girlfriend had not admitted to providing him with an alibi, or if the warehouse employee had not reported the metal box to the police, the case might have remained buried forever. In a civilized society like Britain, civic responsibility, even in the form of a small action, can be the final thread that reconnects justice. Thank you for joining us on this long, haunting journey through the Anna Whitford case. If you'd like to continue following stories that help us see more clearly the truth hidden behind silent gaps, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video, where we'll explore more stories thought to be closed, but still have much to be heard.